In parts of the tropics, where the sea is warm, clear, and shallow, there are underwater reefs. These form a barrier between the coastal waters and the sea beyond. The longest and largest series of reefs in the world lies off the northeast coast of Australia. The Great Barrier Reef extends from New Guinea to central Queensland. Most of the reef is made of coral, and this forms long projections into the water on the sheltered side of the reef. In between the projections are gutters and caves. Behind the crest of the reef is a shallow lagoon. The dark clumps are coral, with coral sand in between. In some places, wind, waves and currents pile the coral sand into heaps to form a coral island. In time, plants become established on the sand, and these attract animals in turn. An island is a good base from which to set out to explore the reef. At low tide, some of the coral is exposed. By swimming along the edge of the reef, you can see the shapes of the coral itself and some of the other life amongst it. Coral is made up of small animals joined together to form a colony. Many have hard skeletons which remain after they die. New coral colonies then take over. And so the reef grows a few centimeters every year. There are many different kinds of coral. Some resemble a honeycomb or have other shapes. Fish are everywhere. Many of the fish hide and feed amongst the coral. One of the best places to look for fish is amongst the coral caves and gutters. Look at the shapes and colours of the fish. A gomphosis, a flute mouth, a harlequin tusk fish, blue damselfish, anemone fish, trumpeters, a stingray, you can also hear the various sounds of these reef animals. The sharp crackling noises are made by shrimps. watch the fish closely, you can often see what they're eating. Watch these butterfly fish for a moment. Many of them feed from the coral. Some of the fish are much larger. This is a parrotfish. The surgeon fish is so called because a structure near its tail resembles a surgeon's scalpel. If you dive with air tanks, you can go down deeper into the water. You also need lights to see the true colors of the life here. Tiny animals live together in fan-like colonies attached to the coral. On the roof of this cave is living coral. The individual animals which make up the coral colonies are easy to see. They're called polyps. Each polyp resembles a sea anemone with a ring of stinging tentacles around its mouth. It uses these to paralyze and capture passing prey. Very few corals live in caves, as most grow best where the light is brighter. In these shaded regions, you can find animals such as sponges, which filter food from the sea water. And so do sea squirts. The feathery gills of the tube worm also collect food. Flatworms feed by browsing. In the darker regions of the caves, there are some fish which only emerge at night. Others, like this small fish on a sponge, never leave the cave. Crayfish live in the darkest corners and move outside only at night. The surge caused by the waves overhead carries food and oxygen to all the cave dwellers. For the moray eel, the cave provides shelter from danger and a hiding place from which to attack its prey. Large fish, like the coral trout, are sought by fishermen. The sweetlip is another. The small fish with a black stripe along its side is a cleaner fish. Watch what it does. The cleaner fish feeds by eating the small parasites which are found on all fish, especially in the gills. The false cleaner fish looks very like a cleaner fish. But when larger fish wait to be cleaned, the false cleaner fish takes a bite of the fish instead. Near the water's surface, there's floating life known as plankton. Most plants and animals of the plankton are too small to see easily. However, some, like these comb jellies, are quite large. The manta ray feeds on plankton. The small fish swimming underneath is a remora. It can attach itself to manta rays and other fish and be carried along. Not only are there many different kinds of fish feeding and sheltering around a coral reef, but there are large numbers of them too. Some of these fish are caught by birds. Crested terns catch fish in this way. Noddy terns pick up small fish very close to the surface. Reef herons fish in shallow water. Even the sand is made by coral polyps. Coral sand is the wave-worn remains of coral skeletons. Some birds of the shore, like the turnstone, find food under seaweed and amongst the coral sand. Many of these waders are summer visitors from the northern hemisphere. Twice each day, the rising tide brings water and food to the sand dwellers. At high tide, the beach is too narrow for the wading birds to feed. In summer, female turtles come to the beach. Most arrive at night, but occasionally one may nest during the day. A shallow depression is dug out with her front flippers, and then she digs an egg chamber with her hind flippers. If the sand is too wet or too dry, she digs a new hole somewhere else or returns to the sea to nest another time. The shallow water of the lagoon provides a home for many animals. Stingrays are sometimes numerous. Coral growth sometimes has a flat top if it's exposed at low tide. Humbug fish and other fish live close to staghorn coral. And watch what happens when danger threatens. Some fish make shelters for themselves in the coral sand. Heliotrid fish dig burrows in the sand and get food from it too. Each mouthful of sand is filtered. The food is swallowed and the waste sand passed out through the gills. The bêche de mer, a sea cucumber, also eats sand. The sand passes through the animal, the food particles are removed, and the sand left behind. Starfish feed largely on snails and other shellfish. This strom is one of the larger shellfish. Look at its eyes. Cowries are hard to find in daylight. Clams are fairly common in shallow water. They're often large and attach themselves to the sea floor. And sometimes they're embedded in the coral. The nudibranch is a shellfish without a shell. Its name means naked gill. The gill is the structure you can see on the animal's back. The hermit crab lives in an empty shell. As it feeds and grows, it needs to find larger and larger shells. These long strands are the tentacles of a worm which lives in a crevice under the coral. The tentacles search for food, which is then taken to the animal's mouth. Camouflage helps protect fish on the reef. Although many of the coral fish seem to be brightly coloured, most are hard to see in the flickering light underwater. The mottled pattern of the moray eel blends with the coral. There are many other examples of protective camouflage. Look at these. The master of camouflage must be the stonefish as it creeps across the coral sand. There are 13 poisonous spines along its back. And these can inflict a very painful sting. Sharks can also be hard to see, especially if the water is cloudy. The Great Barrier Reef is a world of its own. A world built up over countless centuries by the work of billions of tiny polyps. This remarkable collection of living things is easily damaged. Great care will be needed to ensure that the barrier reef, with all its life, continues to survive into the future.